me cry before I started. Those of you who know me, I cry all the time. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for Foundation and Reach Church for having us. I didn't prepare anything. I thought if I did it in my head, and I just thought I'll let God take over and do His job, you know, speak for me. So, well, I guess we'll just start at the beginning. So, my name is Marsha McCormick. My main name is Morgan. So, I think it's important because when I grew up, I was Morgan for most of my life. And those that know us from Sussex County, we're like Morgans were hard-headed and stubborn, you know. So, I grew up in Harrington most of my life. My dad, he was an alcoholic. Of course, when I was growing up, I didn't realize that he was an alcoholic. You know, that kind of thing wasn't talked about. Didn't realize he was addicted to pills until I was older. There was a lot of things I didn't realize. We hid a lot of things in our house, you know. So today it's kind of a big thing for me because I'm gonna actually share things that I only share in my home group or with my sponsor. So, you know, because I never openly shared like that. There was abuse in the home, and because they used to say, oh, we just get whoopings and we just get spankings, you know. But you know, we used to hide bruises, and you know, and they weren't just little bruises. I know I used to go to school with bruises from my neck to my ankles sometimes, and we used to hide these kind of things because that's what you did. You know, we didn't want to have to. Well, I didn't want to have to leave home. You know, go to a foster home or anything like that. And because my dad used to say, you don't realize how good you have it here. So I lived with that for a long time. You know, the verbal, mental, and physical abuse in our home. And until I realized that we weren't living in a house that was that great. You know, until I found out that others had it better than us. And then I started rebelling. My mom was, she was not an alcoholic. She did have behaviors, you know. She was very verbally abusive, you know. I'm not here to put my mom down or anything like that, or my parents down, because, you know, during this program, you know, you realize when you do this program, you can see the patterns where your parents got their behaviors from, you know. And that's the beauty of this program, you know, because you heal and you look through it and you see that, you know, that they're that they learned their behaviors from their parents, you know. And not that I excuse it, but I forgave them for at least a long time ago. So when I'm telling you this is from my perspective. So because I know my mom's probably listening right now, so I don't want her to be hurt. So anyway, as a child, we grew up going to church. We grew up going to a Baptist church, and you know, I grew up. I loved church. My dad was. He used to drive the church bus, and he was big into church, you know. And to me, I always thought that was kind of made me hypocrite, you know, because he would go to church and come home smoking, beating his wife, cheating on her, and getting his kids around, you know. So to me, I thought, you know, the church, you know, they knew that this was going on. They didn't care. So didn't leave a good taste in my mouth about church. Then we would switch churches, and just so happened in one church, the lady was my social worker at school. So finally, I got the nerve up to tell her what was going on in the house, and they swept it underneath the rug because my dad was an elder in church. So, you know, there goes my fear of authority figures because they don't do anything to protect you, you know. There was a lot of things that went on in our household that we hid and we lied about, you know. And of course, because of that, I I learned to be a good manipulator, and I learned how to lie and cover things up. Did that for a lot of years. And we know how secrets keep us sick. And because of that, there were things in my life that I wasn't protected from. At an early age, I was molested twice before I was 5, and because my parents never went to the authorities, never did anything about it, it was kind of swept under the rug, and never felt protected, never felt like, that love that a parent should give you. So when I got old enough, I saw that in a man, and I can see like the pattern of where men became a source of comfort and the love that I didn't get at home. I took that in men. So I started drinking. The first drink I remember having and getting caught and getting drunk at was 8 years old. That was the first time I got caught. My dad caught me. But I started actually drinking like on a regular basis at 13. And I skipped school a couple times, and I had a friend who would come over, and we would drink, and we had people in town, we would go, and this happened after high school, we would drink. And my parents never knew that I was drinking. And because I had a guy that I got with, and he was the center of my attention, so I thought this was my way out. I love this guy, I thought this was the way I'm going to get out of my parents' house. So I got pregnant, and ended up moving in with him, got away from the abuse. My parents got divorced finally, and at the age of 19, my world fell apart when he, we had a child together. I'm sorry, I'm separate. We had a child together, and my world fell apart when I found out that he had gotten a 16-year-old girl pregnant while we were a week apart, a week from getting married. And so we split up. And at this time I wasn't drinking, I wasn't doing anything, I was just stay-at-home mom. So we split apart, and the visitation thing started happening, and then I started drinking again. And this time, led to marijuana, led to all kinds of drug usage and everything else. And that's when, like, my 20s were just a blur. I can't even tell you. There were so many things, men, all that. And God was not in the picture, not in my life. Like, he was not setting my attention. And I can't say I didn't pray to God, get me out of this, and, foxhole prayers, but he was not the center of my life, But I don't know, I guess sometime around the time I turned 30, I remember saying, I just had enough hangovers, and I thought, I'm going to stop drinking. That I'm going to fix the problem myself. Of course, can't fix it on our own, but I thought I could, So I did, I stopped drinking. And I did that for a couple years. I ended up getting married. At this time, I had 2 children, because during my 20s, I got pregnant, had another child. So I had 2 children, and I married a man who had 3 children. We ended up having a child together. So we had mine, his, and ours, Brady Bunch. We were married 15 years, and during that time, I was sober for a good while. I would say the first 3 or 4 years of our marriage. And then I realized he was actually using. So, of course, I didn't understand addiction at this time, because I didn't realize I was an addict, I didn't know I was an alcoholic, because, that kind of stuff wasn't talked about, in our household, And growing up, I didn't know anything about addiction. So my husband was stealing stuff out of the house and doing drugs and all kinds of things. So finally, I'm like, I would say to him, if you love us enough, you can get help. If you just go get, do this, go to church and pray, go to detox, and he said, I'm going to quit on my own, and all kinds of stuff that we all said before, and I believed him many times, until finally I was like, that's enough, I've had enough, and our marriage fell apart. So after 3.5 years of marriage, I finally did have him kick out. Of course, we stayed married for 15 years, although we were not together for most of those years. We had a child who had autism. And when I found out my son had autism, I'm sorry. I was mad at God. I blamed God for that. I thought I was punished big for all the things I did. Sorry. I really did. I thought it was my fault. My son had autism. You know, I did everything right. I felt like I was doing everything right. You know, I was going to church. I was being a good mom. I stopped drinking. I stopped doing crime. I stopped doing everything. And then my son gets autism. He was talking, and then he stopped talking. And it broke my heart. It still does break my heart. He's 21 now. And it still breaks my heart. I don't blame God anymore because he's such a beautiful child. And if you met Jonah, you would definitely know that he is definitely a gift from God. But I didn't feel that at the time. You know, but I was mad at God. So I started using pills. So during this time, my pills I started it was slow addiction, just started, pill here and there, and then eventually I was doing all kinds of pills, and then the pills led to heroin. And I remember the first time I went to detox, I was snorting them, and I had just been using it, nasally. And the lady said, one of the directors in there said, the people that do it nasally have more chance of recovery than the people that do it intravenously. And I remember thinking, I'm going to beat this, and they're not, thinking I was better than them. And little did I know that within 3 months I would be back there because I was using needles, and no better than them. I mean, I'm an addict, and why would I think I was better than another addict, But my mentality was so messed up at the time, so, I don't know. So, during all this, I finally got to a place where the drugs got out of control. And, you think people don't know you're using, but they do know, and people tried to help me, and I would take it, and then finally I get to a place where I just had enough. And one night I took them as a heroin, and I tried to commit suicide. And the same night, my daughter's father passed away. I never admitted that to anyone that I did it on purpose, but it was so intentional. But he passed away, and I always felt guilty about that time because, he raised my daughter, and I was the addict, and he wasn't, and why did God spare me and not him, and my daughter didn't speak to me for years after that, and until we get to 2023, when I went up here to Christiana one night, and some of you know this story, because I had multiple seizures, and at the time they thought I'd had multiple strokes. And from Strength and Recovery came in and prayed over me, Zach and I think James and a couple of them came in and prayed over me. And because of that, I was okay, and I went home a couple days later. And then it wasn't shortly after that I used again, and then I overdosed, and I ended up abandoned. And when I was abandoned, I didn't take it serious. I thought, I'm gonna get out of here, I'm gonna do whatever, I'm gonna stay clean, because I thought at the time that all I needed to do was stop doing drugs. You know, that's the answer to the problem. Stop doing drugs, and I'll be all right. Because I still thought I could do it on my own. It's not my time. So I'll wrap this up. But and of course, most of us know that you can't do it on your own. I didn't do severe advice. Sorry. So because you can't do it on your own. So I guess because you know I wasn't paying attention there. I know some of you heard the story. You know I was in band, I was coloring, you know, and like I ended up getting in isolation because I had shingles. So you know you get that gift of desperation, you know, and I was in there like pleading, like I'll do anything, you know, whatever God wants me to do. So I ended up moving up here, and since I moved up here, you know I've got a sponsor. I just started working this program.
Home group.
And I was going to say, so the first thing I did when I came up here, I always thought this is always, like God is amazing. The first meeting I went to when I moved up here was Strength Recovery. And they were, and I guess I've told this story before. When I walked in there, they're like, oh, you look so good since we saw you last time. And I'm like, who are these people? And they, of course, these are people that prayed over me. Now, I didn't know this because I was in home at the time, you know, and I asked them afterwards, and that's what they told me, you know, and I always thought that was amazing how God orchestrated that so that I moved up here to be with these same people that prayed over me. And these same people are my home group, and they're still in my life to this day. They're the ones that, you know, build me up and strengthen me and, you know, text me and say, you know, you're going to do a good job when you go up here. And they're my recovery family, you know, and I'm grateful for that. God knew what I needed, you know. So, but like I said, it's been a journey, but a journey of healing, because there's been a lot of brokenness, but you know, through this program, I've gained healing, understanding who I am, and I think I'm out of time now. Am I? So I hope I've said enough, but thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk here and share my story, and thank you.